kind of, and what we talked to them about, and see if the rest of the board's interested in that.
Okay, so once you get those costs done, we'll discuss it some more. Okay. One of our board goals was to see how we could better utilize Channel 8 and possibly videotape businesses in town and do short commercials for them. And I've been speaking with Brad Hughes, town resident, he's a chamber member, board member, and I spoke to Eddie, our AV guy, and he's put together some bids to move forward with this project. And we could do half a dozen businesses, and it would cost the town about $1,800 to do the interviews, 3 to 5 minute infomercials. He'd do all the editing and everything. I just want to get the board's opinion on that. It's something that we wanted to do via our goals. So,
what's the viewership, do you think? Because that's, to me,
12,500 people, I think.
Potential.
Everybody,
according to the Nielsen ratings,
tunes in for the board meetings.
So according to the Nielsen ratings, I mean, how much actual people will be watching these? It sounds like a great idea, but if nobody watches it, then it's a wasted.
Does Brad have the experience to conduct the interview, or is he the videographer, or both?
Eddie would help stage things, and he would go through and kind of give direction. Brad has done this kind of thing, not in front of the camera, but in front of tape, where he would do this, what he called man on the streets, and he would interview businesses, and it would be audio footage that they would post on various websites.
The Channel 8 requirement is like a public service channel that Comcast has agreed to provide.
Yeah,
as part of-
a public access channel that the town controls.
But does any
Any
commercial,
part of the franchise agreement that would restrict that?
I don't believe so, no.
I'm just wondering about any commercial aspects changing.
There are some videos I've seen on there where they're actually doing interviews, and I'm not sure what type of interviews they are, but they are 10, 15-minute programs that have been on there in the past.
I think it should be fine. I'll check the exact.
I think as long as we give anybody who wants,
Yes.
any business in town who wants to do so,
I was
the
just
same
provided
opportunity.
to my favorite ones. Oh, no. Did that come on? Sorry. Yes, I agree.
I'd like to hear maybe from Heather from the chamber. When your time comes up, you don't have to right now. Tell us your thoughts about it.
So my general thoughts about this is it seems like a good idea. I want to make sure that staff has vetted all this. It seems like a reasonable use and have a report back to that. But I obviously have been strongly in favor of using Channel 8 at a much greater capacity to do different things. So
I think it could open other opportunities. We've discussed possibly taping Monarch High football game.
Right, exactly.
Having things, and once we start having something that's interesting on there, then more people will start viewing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
our viewership will double to 10.
I think the costs are reasonable, so for that, it's a good way to start sampling it.
So you're talking, you said a total of 1,800?
About 1,800. I know Eddie's probably watching right now, so we'll have to sharpen that pencil a little bit on the cost.
But yeah,
It's a very reasonable cost, though.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I think so.
I'm sure we'll explore the option and give us feedback and thoughts about it. So
Okay. So next steps, what is the board, just work with Matt on that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was chatting with a resident about the Superior Cemetery, and she's been doing some research on it. And she had mentioned that outside of the gates, or the perimeter of it, that she claimed that there was some unmarked graves outside of that. That's a somewhat known fact in that research community. And I'm wondering what property is next to the cemetery, and is there a possibility of maybe talking to them to see if we can maybe back up the fence line so that if there is something out there, that it would be encompassed inside the...
Yeah, a few years ago, we did
that way map all
survey.
the radar thing or whatever.
Yeah. So I'll have to go back and work with Martin, who's involved in that, see what that had, and then I can get back to the board.
Okay.
Was that cemetery ever affiliated with a church, or was it always just a community?
No, I think it's a
Yeah.
community.
Okay. And then last, we talked about, a little bit before, about the town purchasing electric vehicles at some point. And there was an article in the last issue of the CML newsletter about a program called Charge Ahead Colorado. And they're providing resources to communities in our area to give money towards additional charging stations and fleets of electric vehicles. And there's a criteria. I've printed this out. I can give this to you. But it seems like we would qualify for this, to put in additional stations and also, a considerable amount of money towards an electric fleet. I wonder, are you familiar with that? Charge Ahead Colorado?
I'm not.
Okay. Well, something to look
Definitely
into.
take a look at it.
That's it. Thank you.
Trustee Surley.
The only thing I wanted to mention, I went to Shred It Day on Saturday morning, and again, thanks to the town for that. It's something that is a great benefit. My recollection was in past years there was something of a limit on what you could bring to Shred, and I don't know whether that makes sense or not, but I will say that there was a huge backup because there were a couple of truckloads of shredding trucks with shredded material to be shredded that wanted to watch the stuff shred, and so people were just kind of waiting, and there was I don't know whether that cost us more money or not, but it sure made it inconvenient to run the thing, at least initially. I don't know if that thinned out after a while.
My recollection is the same as yours, that there was a limit, but I will...
Was that a resident, or was it a business?
Well, I think it was a resident, but it was like somebody who might have been saving the last 50 years of this.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But it was a pickup truck full of boxes. That was one of them, and that was in line behind somebody else that had everything. So if you wanted to stay and watch your stuff being shredded, you were going to spend half the morning there, which is unfortunate. I wasn't interested in doing that, so I relied on the kindness of strangers. But if there's a significant cost impact by that, I think we should limit what we're doing, because
Yeah, I'll check on that. Yeah, I would agree.
that's the only point I want to bring up.
Okay. Let's see, I've had meetings with US 36 mayors, commissioners. I'm not sure that there's really much more information compared to what we've talked about. I had a meeting with Maria Garcia Berry, who just was curious about our thoughts about what they call the Western Beltway. Just mentioned where we were with all that and had a nice conversation, but that's about the highlight of it.
Who is she with?
She works for CRL. I think that she's a consultant.
Because I think she speaks tomorrow morning at the
Commuting Solutions.
Commuting Solutions.
She's intimately involved in transportation issues and has for a very long period of time. Works frequently with the Denver Chamber of Commerce regarding issues like that and ballot questions. So,
Did she have an opinion on it?
she didn't. I didn't really have an opinion about it. So, I'm sure that she has an opinion about it, but so just wanted to say that. And then it's not really town business, but I got the opportunity to participate in an Eagle Scout. What would it be? I'm not sure what the right review. Eagle Board review, and it continues to amaze me the quality of not just Eagle Scouts but the youth in our community. And it was a great time.
That was the second one of the week from Troop 278, and both of them are incredible stories. It was Derek Ayala was Saturday, and we reviewed his video. It was good.
Yeah.
And I was going to say this afterwards, but Derek would be great. He wants to go into film, so he would be great to assist on
To
the
participate in that.
Absolutely.
That's all I had. Trustee Williams?
Well, I attended a Open Space Advisory Committee meeting for Trustee Pennington. Again, they did not have quorum. A few members were not able to attend, and then there is 3 openings.
Yeah.
We discussed the town center. Obviously, we couldn't make any kind of recommendations because there was no quorum, but some of their thoughts were protecting the creek corridor, having like a good 50-foot buffer from any kind of use around the creek corridor. And I wanted to make sure that as we move forward with the town center PD, or final PD, that we go to all the different committees and have each committee weigh in on their specific committee charge and
Yeah.
comment on all of them, because I think it's very important. Each committee has, expertise in certain areas, and it can definitely help the board, work on certain things like open space or trails or recreation or any kind of thing like that. But I would like to see that.
Yeah, well, they'll likely have to have special meetings to do it, but that's what we're going to start this week, start asking each of the committees.
Correct, and Open Space knows that, and they're willing to do it.
Check those too. Yeah, that's where they, so.
So that would be ProStack and all the other committees. And I held one of my regular First Fridays with Deb at Juju's Bakery. So first Friday of the month, and it was pretty well attended. And again, I had it on the town center. That was my topic of the month. We talk about other things as well. And I sent to the board and to staff and to the developer a collection of comments that I have gotten from all the residents from the last few months about the town center. And I just sent that off to, I assume you got that. Thank you. And everyone here, I assume, got that as well. And I'd be happy to send it to anyone else who's interested in seeing that. And that is...
Trustee Kirkpatrick.
Just a couple of items. The first one is, given the heavy travel schedule of the summer, is there, and I'm glad, Alex, that you're here today, will we have a Transportation and Safety Committee meeting this summer? Do we have anything planned? Is there anything that we need to discuss?
Alex and I will talk about it tomorrow, and
Okay.
we'll let you guys know if there's...
Because if there's something, if we could do it like at 5 o'clock, maybe on the 10th of June,
Okay.
a month out. And it's going to be a long day that day, but otherwise we're not going to be able to get together until the end of the summer.
Right.
And I believe Gladys had something that she wanted to discuss further.
Okay.
And that we mentioned that she should come to the next TSC.
That's fine, yeah. Just something to think about. I don't know what your plans are for the... Okay. The second thing is, I don't know if I missed this, but did you get any feedback or anything back from the Ethan Allen property? You heard nothing. Their silence is deafening then.
We sent an email and a letter letting them know what the action was. And
Okay. That only validates how we voted. It's just, okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Trustee Pennington.
Well, we participated in all 3 recycling events, and my brother-in-law from Newark, New Jersey was here and was very impressed with the shredded day. The only compliments all around, however, on the large item, I happened to throw out a tattered love seat, and it took 2 days for it to be picked up, and my graduation guests arrived when my love seat was out of the curb. I thought about putting it on my front porch,
You're
but
slumming.
resisted. Anyway, so I don't know if it was so popular that they didn't get around until the end of the second day. But
Must
they,
have been pretty tattered, because some things were disappearing before.
Yeah.
Yeah, some disappear, that's right.
yeah, we're not going to go there, but when you've got something so bad it doesn't disappear. But anyway, I think we should probably try to get those things picked up the first day. On the transportation thing, have we made contact this year with El Dorado K-8? 2 years ago, they really had significant problems at the school and the traffic patterns, and we didn't at all meet with them this entire year, so...
I have meetings with both principals this month.
Great. So, yeah, let us know if we need to. Thanks to Deb for covering OSAC.
Wait, can I Dorothy, can you remind both El Dorado and Superior about the contingency grant funds that we have? Because I'm not sure that El Dorado is fully aware of them.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks to Deb for covering USAC for me. I appreciate it. I had touch base with Matt on an issue I brought up last meeting about the number of nabs on the speed trap on Colton. And I had asked that we put an informational sign there showing people how fast they're going and what the posted limit is. I wanted to add that at the time that Transportation and Safety Committee discussed this, we agree that it should stay at 35 and not increase to 40 based on the use of that road and the kids crossing to the park and whatnot. But Matt did inform me that, am I paraphrasing correctly, there will be that sign put out there eventually?
Alex and his staff are
Studying
getting
it?
proposals on costs,
Great, okay.
information on what the speed radar
Great.
signs will be.
Because I travel it day in and day out, and frankly, am impressed. I have not yet gotten one, but a lot of people have. There's always the red lights flashing. And then just my little old sentimental tidbit here. Congrats to everybody who has a graduate or is graduating. I graduated my youngest this weekend, and I know Jim Payne graduated his youngest from CU as well, and you've got a graduate coming. And just want to say, it does take a village to raise these kids these days, from the family, the friends, the neighbors, the educators. It takes a great deal of effort, so congrats to all.
But you want to hear something on a personal note? I was talking to Nicholas, who's graduating. He's so eager to go to California. That's where my family is. He wants to go to the beach and all that. But when he was reminiscing back at his 18 years here at Superior, he said, but if I had a family and I had kids, this is the place I would want to raise them. So it says something about our little town.
Yep. Thanks. Town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So our public works crews have been busy and will probably continue to be busy on pothole repairs with the weather, the warm, the cold, and the snow. It's just, they've popped up not just in our town, but everywhere. So with the warm weather, they'll start to make some progress on that. Let's see. We get updates from the Louisville Library on usage and year-to-date use figures, and they had a figure in there that 20% of our residents are using their library, but
20% of their usage
Right,
is Superior residents,
yeah.
yeah.
So, and the drop-off continues to be a big hit as well, so convenient for our residents to drop off their materials. Memorial is coming up this weekend. Still in need of some volunteers, so I include that information in the digest. If you know anybody that wants to volunteer, you can let them know. They contact Katie in the Parks office and get signed up. And then the last thing is, my staff's been getting information on the telephone town hall call-in meeting that the board's talked about, and the city of Longmont and Westminster have done, at least last year. I know both of them did it. So we're working with this company to help us do one this year maybe, and so I put some dates, possible dates for the board to consider, and they're open Mondays. 17th may not be a good day anymore, but July 29th or August 19th, if you have a preference, you can send me an email and let me know, but that's kind of what we're thinking.
Why are you thinking off Mondays rather than a regular Monday?
Availability of the board. Most of the board schedules Mondays to be here, so I thought.
But, I mean, why not just do it at a regular board meeting that we know we're going to be here? Didn't you say off Monday?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
She's talking about a
Well, I wanted to keep
What
it
if-
separate from your regular meetings. I don't want people to get confused between a regular meeting and an off. You know what I'm saying?
So what is the purpose of it? I mean,
Yeah, but-
is it for
It's
people
just
to
an
call in and
opportunity
be
for
part of?
residents to call in and ask questions of the board and, on various things that aren't on an agenda, let's say, if they have questions about
But why
whatever.
don't they come and use the open mic like we're about to have public comment
They
coming up
can.
here?
They could do that too. This is just something I thought the board was interested in doing, and
We had talked about our town meeting, but I
Right.
didn't know whether we talked about it as a separate meeting or a regular meeting. I can see how it'd be hard to do regular business that way, though.
right, yeah.
But maybe there's some Monday that we don't have a large agenda, that we
It
would
would
do
have
that.
to be a work session. It couldn't be.
Right,
a-
it can't be a regular meeting.
Yeah, I think what Sandy was saying, why can't we have a work session on this, on
Yeah,
Monday?
on a regular
Since we're going to be here
Monday,
anytime,
yeah.
why can't one next?
Well, I love the idea. I mean, Lisa's been the champion of this, and obviously she's not here. I love the idea because we are a community that has a lot of families with small children, and breaking away at night is very difficult. And this just opens up the realm to the whole community, I think, to be able to call in and participate. And so I'm a huge fan of this, too. I'd love to see us be able to take advantage of this during the whole town center consideration, because I think we get a lot of interesting comments, but it sounds like we can't sort of meet that time frame. But I think just keeping it on a regular Monday
During a work session.
during a work session, having it very well publicized is a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Town attorney,
Nothing from me, thank you.
town clerk? Thank you. That brings us to item number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. Where'd George go? George.
Where is?
He's up in the lottery rally.
It's a personal invitation.
That's my fun.
He's fine, okay. Wow, all right. Additional public comment? Not seeing any. Item number 6, presentations, and tonight we have the pleasure of hearing a report from the Superior Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Heather Craycraft with the Superior Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for the time this evening. Really just wanted to invite you each personally to our annual dinner and awards that is coming up on Tuesday, June 4th. You will be receiving an invitation, but just a little save the date. And in an effort to maybe strum up some new ideas for some of our awards that we award that evening, that a few of you in this room have been awarded in the past, Ms. Phyllis, as a Superior Achiever, is one award, as well as Volunteer of the Year, Service Group, Educator of the Year, Independent Business, and Large Business. So if you know anyone who might fit those kind of areas in our community, we would love to have any input from you, as well as the general public. So I just want to take this chance to invite any nominations as soon as possible, so that we can have all the awards and plaques and proper invitations awarded to those recipients as well. So again, it is annual dinner time at the Chamber, so that's our celebration of the year, that we thank the membership and have them to a nice evening with a little taste of all the local restaurants and caterers.
Great.
And then may I comment on the Channel 8 business focus? I think it would be fantastic. I would be happy to work with whomever is the one kind of leading the charge, whether it be to coordinate or to kind of strum up some business. And you're in good hands with State Farm's Brad Hughes, because he has done a great job on his pieces that he's put together.
Good hands, I like that. Just as the different.
I know.
Okay, thanks. That brings us to item number 7, consent agenda. On the consent agenda is approval of the minutes of the March 19, 2013, and April 29, 2013 special meetings, and the April 22, 2013 regular Board of Trustees meeting. Acceptance of the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting and meeting notes of the Open Space Advisory Committee, the Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails Advisory Committee, and the Recycling and Conservation Advisory Committee. And final approval of an ordinance amending 16-15-30 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding financial guarantees for public infrastructure warranties. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda by Trustee Sorelli, second by Trustee Williams. Discussion. Kendra, do you want us to vote on this individually with the...
No, I think you're fine.
Okay, all in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. That brings us to item number 8, public hearing and approval of resolution approving a substantial modification to the Superior Urban Renewal Plan by authorizing implementation of tax increment financing within the Superior Town Center urban renewal area by subsequent resolution of the Board of Trustees. With that, I'll open the public hearing. And Phyllis, you have proof of publication?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Mr. Magley, do you want to mention briefly what this is?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. This evening, the board is considering under public hearing approval of proposed Second Amendment to the Superior Urban Renewal Authority, which amends and provides authorization for implementation of a tax increment financing within the boundaries of the 2006 edition of properties at that time. In 1995, the town adopted the Urban Renewal Authority as a way to the plan identified the plan area to be property located in original town Superior Marketplace, a portion of McCaslin Boulevard, and property north of the town water treatment plant. That plan in 1995 permitted the tax increment financing at the Superior Marketplace development. In 2006, a First Amendment to the Urban Renewal Authority was proposed and approved by the town board. This amendment to the Urban Renewal Plan added properties known as the BL Minkick properties, the Spicer property, the Wada property, and the Shutt property. These are generally located east of McCaslin and south of US 36. These properties were included in the plan to provide an increment funds for the development of the properties as redevelopment occurs in the planned area. Tonight's amendment, the Second Amendment to the Urban Renewal Authority, would permit the Urban Renewal Authority to phase implementation of property tax increment financing within the boundaries of the 2006 edition, implementation of sales tax increment financing on the portions of the 2006 edition. These incremental tax revenues would be used to assist with the public improvements, the planned area to alleviate existing conditions which impede the development. It's the opinion of the staff that these incremental tax revenues conform with the overall plan of the town and the Superior Town Center. Pros to this would be that it permits the Urban Renewal Authority to use tax increment financing for both sales and property taxes within the 2006 added properties, allows construction of significant public improvements to take place, and has the potential for stimulation of private investment creation and job opportunities on the properties, as well as significant public improvements including civic center, multi-purpose athletic fields, parks, open space, and other public improvements consistent with the plan. Budget implications of this Second Amendment include TIF revenues to assist the town center public improvement costs. The development then is projected to generate in excess of $100 million in net new town revenues over the 25-year plan life, as well as allowing the town's utility operations, also known as Superior Metropolitan District Number 1, is becoming financially self-sufficient. The Planning Commission reviewed the proposed Second Amendment on April 30, 2013, and recommended approval by the town board.
Okay, thank you. And the town attorney, you want to give us some information about timing of this?
Sure. Since this material went in your packet, we've been in discussions with the developer and determining the best way to go about this. It's my recommendation at this point that we continue this public hearing until a date certain, at least 30 days from tomorrow, because I think there'll be some modifications to the plan that you have before you tonight, and that additional 30 days will allow us to give the county a full 30 days notice of the change that we're going to implement.
Okay.
And then you would be able to hold the public hearing at that time and consider the modified language as opposed to the language you have tonight.
Okay. So I want to be completely transparent, and if people need to speak to this particular issue tonight, my preference would be, however, if possible, to do that all at the one meeting at a date certain.
I would agree. There will be some changes made to the document. Obviously, if there's someone here tonight who would like to speak tonight and is not available to speak later, they're welcome to speak tonight, but there will be changes made to the document that comes before you. And the changes, not to hide the ball, the changes will be that the TIF, the tax increment financing, the modification will allow the TIF to be implemented immediately rather than at a date in the future,
Okay.
in the first phase of the development.
Okay. Did the board want to ask any questions, understanding that we'll be able to do this at the next meeting? Anybody that wants to speak to this particular issue that's unable to attend the next meeting?
Do we want to say the date of the next meeting?
Yeah, I will, but I just want to make sure, so it doesn't sound like anybody needs to do that necessarily tonight. So the next meeting, the next Monday that would follow the 30-day calendar, if I'm correct, is June 17th, 2013, and I recommend a motion to continue the public hearing to the date certain of that date. Trustee Gregora, second by Trustee Williams. Any discussion about any of that? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. So this will be held in its entirety on the 17th of June. Okay?
Thank you.
That brings us to item number 9, public hearing and approval of a resolution regarding the STC, Superior Town Center Metropolitan District Service Plan. Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. I thought I was missing something with that. I'll open the public hearing, and Phyllis, you have proof of publication?
I have a copy of the notice of the public hearing.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Mr. Megley?
Thank you, Mayor. Brief introduction on this item. Branch Capital, also known as RC Superior LLC, is the prospective developer of the Town Center project, and they're requesting to form 3 metropolitan districts to assist in financing the construction, operation, and maintenance of needed infrastructure such as utilities, roads, parking garages, as well as financing the construction of enhanced public improvements such as multi-purpose playing fields, recreation community center, parks, trails, amphitheater, and others within the development. RC Superior is proposing to construct the development in several phases. As each construction phase is completed, the development phase will be included in a particular district. The boundaries of those districts will never overlap, and all properties in the Town Center project will be included in the district at some point. You've received in your packet, there's 3 service plans for each of the districts. The language in each service plan is the same. We've also received a copy of the capital plan, which is the cost estimate for the public improvements in each plan as an exhibit, as well as a copy of Chapter 3 of the Superior Municipal Code, which covers the formation of special districts. Highlights of the RC Superior service plans include district financing to assist in the financing of acquisition, construction, and development of public improvements and improvements revenues from each of the debts to be issued by the districts. All public improvements would be dedicated to the town unless otherwise determined by the town during the final development plan. So as each final development plan comes forward for the Town Center project, will determine what public improvements will be dedicated to the town. The maximum amount of bonds that could be issued is $145 million. The maximum term of any bonds would be 25 years from the date of issuance. The maximum interest rate of any bonds would be 9%. Maximum debt service mill levy would be 50 mills. And then there's potential for an additional mill levy of up to 10 mills to cover the cost of operational expenses. The town has the option to petition district court to dissolve a district if it determines the district has achieved the purpose for which it was created. Any significant modifications to the plan must be approved by the town. And the last highlight is the town must approve any fees that are imposed by the district. The proposed service plans comply with all the requirements contained in Chapter 3 of the Superior Municipal Code, with the exception of the maximum debt mill levy, which is 50 mills in the plans and was agreed to previously by the town in the financing agreement. Pros for forming the metro districts: they allow financing of the infrastructure for the development. Mill levies are competitive with surrounding metropolitan districts in the area. We think this will attract new businesses and create jobs. Adds public improvements and enhances livability. This will stimulate private investment, increase property values, and fund public amenities throughout the project. It also has no impact on existing residences or businesses. Some of the cons: additional property taxes and fees on future property owners within the project or the districts. Town has limited control of the districts, and the districts could be perceived as a fiscal incentive for the developer. The Planning Commission recommendation, they reviewed the service plan on April 30th, 2013. They found submittal to be in compliance with the town code and voted 6-0 to support approval of the service plans. Included with your packet are resolution, service plans, a copy of Chapter 3, and a summary of the surrounding metropolitan districts. And then there's representatives from the firm McGeady Cisneros. They have a presentation that they're going to give to the board, and then we'll open it up for questions.
I'm sorry.
Trustee Williams?
Can I clarify something that you, I think you misspoke on something, and I just want to make sure this is correct. The debt service mill levy would be a maximum of 40 mills plus an additional 10 mills for operational expenses, that being 50.
That's the intent, but I believe it's 50 plus an additional 10.
So that's 60.
In the bond documents, right?
So that would be 60 mills as a total, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. If there's anybody from the applicant perhaps that would like to speak to this issue?
Yes, Cassia Furman, I'm an attorney with McGeady Cisneros. How do I move forward
How's the arrow keys?
Okay, just with the arrow.
Yeah, the right arrow key.
Great. I've been working with Mary Jo Doherty, with Randy Goodson on behalf of RC Superior and the Creative, who are the applicants and the developers of the Superior Town Center project. And we've been working with the town on a number of fronts, and Randy's been working on, additionally to our portion. This evening, we're here to address the service plan approval for the metropolitan districts that we're proposing to form to help finance public infrastructure to the project. I'm going to run through this PowerPoint pretty quickly, and if anybody has any additional questions specifically about the project or about metro districts generally, I'm happy to answer them. Metropolitan districts are quasi-municipal corporations that are organized pursuant to Title 32 of the Colorado statutes. They are, as such, heavily regulated by Colorado statute and also by Chapter 3 of your municipal code here in Superior. The use of metropolitan districts in Colorado is very prevalent. Our firm, I believe at the moment, represents somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 special districts, and we've formed many for the purpose of facilitating development and forming a bridge between public bodies such as municipalities and private developers to be able to obtain tax-exempt municipal bonds and other financing mechanisms to pay for the huge public infrastructure costs that are associated with developing projects these days. Under the premise of growth paying its own way, the special districts enables the costs of the district to be borne by those who are benefited by the improvements as opposed to everyone in the community. The Metropolitan District has to provide by statute at least two of these powers that you can see up on the screen. For our project at the town center, we're looking at improvements that include major water and sewer infrastructure upgrades, streets both internally and then new connections to McCaslin that would include a roundabout, and I think a few other access points to the project as well. The civic spaces that we've discussed and talked about in the public finance agreement that you approved, not all of which can be funded directly through the Metropolitan District, but are a component of this project, and some of which, including the park spaces, will be. And also internal streets and drainage. And safety protection is an item that falls under traffic and street powers as well. This is the procedure for organizing a special district. I would just add that the special district is also an entity that's similar to a local government like a town, but it doesn't have police powers and is also limited to the powers that you as the town board granted in its service plans that you'll be looking at this evening. So the basic process, we're here at the public hearing for approval of the service plan, which is the third item. If you approve the service plans this evening, we'll move forward with the district court process and working towards a November election to approve organization of the district and quite possibly and authorizing the debt as well. Proposed for you in your packets this evening would be the creation of 3 separate metropolitan districts that will work as an interrelated group to finance and support infrastructure development on the project. Just to provide a little background on why multiple districts are important and where they're typically used, by way of contrast, if there was a fairly homogeneous project like a residential neighborhood, one project I'm working on right now has 50 patio homes. Well, there's only need for one district there because they're all the same type of development, and it's a finite construction process. Everybody is similarly situated within the project. With a project like the Superior Town Center, which is mixed use and will be developed in phases together and in connection with the town's land use approval project when they come in for final development plans for specific phases of the project, and also recognizing the different needs of residential and commercial properties as far as taxation and management goes. The multiple district is the favored approach and used very frequently for these types of projects throughout the state. There's some examples of some other projects there that utilize multiple district formats, and I'm happy to get into examples and talk about those if you want, but I'm just going to skip through it. Initially, what we're looking to do is form 3 small pod districts that will be de minimis land holdings within the larger inclusion area that is the entire Superior Town Center project. And as final development plans are approved for phases, they'll come into to be within the district boundaries. And there will be one of the districts set up as the control district that provides operation and maintenance oversight, and the other districts will operate as financing districts to bring in the tax increment revenue and support repayment of debt that the district assumes to pay for those obligations. Special districts are governed by a board of directors. The 5-member board approach is preferred. Often it can be difficult to find 7 people that are interested in serving on the boards, but 5 seems to work well. They're elected, the directors, by a majority vote of registered electors within the district to serve 4-year terms. And if there's an open seat, another director can be appointed to fill the vacancy. Districts are authorized
Can I actually
to-
just break it 4.5 seconds? So the electors would have to be property owners within the district, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, or hold a contract to purchase property
hold a
within the
contract.
district, which is often what you see done. And then as the district evolves, so does the composition of the board typically. I won't go through all of the types of debt that districts can issue. What we're looking at with Superior Town Center is the second item on the list, primarily the general obligation limited tax, and that would be the bonds of up to $145 million that would be supported with the 50 mil debt service levy. Although I will point out that pursuant to the public finance agreement, the town's total commitment towards that 145 figure with the tax increment is only 75% of that figure, and that's in the public finance agreement. So just noting that there's other types of debt that can be assumed too, but this district would not be able to really move forward with other types of financing without the town's approval. Sources of revenue include property taxes, fees, special assessments, specific ownership taxes, and shared revenues. For the Superior Town Center project, we have in the service plans a component for district property taxes, which would be the mills that the district would assess. And in addition, we've negotiated a property tax increment revenue scheme with the town in the public finance agreement that we're in the process of fleshing out via the SURA plan amendments and a cost-sharing agreement between the town, SURA, and the district, which will really get into the detail of the pledge and how the funds will flow. There's also a small sales tax increment component to the financing plan for Superior Town Center that's limited to the Shook and Spicer properties and only to the first 25,000 square feet of commercial development on that southern portion of the property at I think a 100% rate for the first 10 years and then 50% for the second 15. Okay. So districts are limited by the components that are in the service plan, which you're considering approving tonight, which, by the way, I should mention all three have basically identical content. And then there are also various legislative protections, which I'm sure you're familiar with. TABOR, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which is the law of the land here in Colorado. You can't incur debt without a vote of the registered electors of the legislative and public entity that's considering taking on that debt. Mill levy limitations, which again for this project we're looking at the 50 mills for the debt service cap, which is in compliance with the Colorado statutes on that point, and then an additional up to 10 mills for operation of the district. There's also investor limitation and registration requirements. Non-statutory protections, this is the content of the service plan. We've already gone through most of these items. I will add that the service plans that you are reviewing this evening do contain a provision that would allow the district to form a special improvement district within the district, and that's a mechanism that's used to obtain different kinds of financing with special assessments instead of property tax based, and it would be an offset, not additional debt that would be incurred, and the consent of the town would be required before any SID was created within the project. Next, maximum debt issuance authorization, we already discussed the $145 million, and we will be complying with the town code annual reporting requirements. So by August of each year, the districts will submit to the town an accounting and accounts of everything that's gone on within the past year. Oh, that would be the end of the slideshow. Any questions for us?
Trustee Williams?
Sure.
So with the 10 mills for the O&M, who gets that?
Well, sorry. The district would, the 10 mills, the operation mill levy covers the district's expenses in operating and also maintaining any of the public infrastructure that it's still charged with having oversight of. What we've discussed with the town is that the town is prepared to accept dedication of the public improvements after they're completed and constructed, in which case those costs would not be borne by the district. But there are still operational costs, there's annual reporting requirements, there's statutory obligations that you have to meet. Typically those wouldn't meet up to 10 mills, it's where there is maintenance obligations involved that would probably be invoked. But it's nice to have that cushion if we did end up getting all the way up to 50 on the debt, because for whatever reason, mostly likely the projections for growth were slower than, ended up being slower than anticipated. And it did get pushed up to that 50 mil cap. If you only have 50 mills authorized and it's all pledged to the debt, and the district's in a situation where it has then no ability to take on any additional revenue for maintenance, is where you see a lot of failed districts and failed projects. So we believe it's fiscally responsible for the district and the town to authorize an O&M.
Trustee Williams, also just to add into that.
I'm sorry, and you are who?
Hi, good evening, this is Randy Goodson.
And you're with?
I'm with RC Superior.
Thank you.
And I'm the applicant for the project. Cassie, thank you very much for making the presentation. I wanted to answer some of the questions because we have, there's the legal aspect and then our business approach. Before I do that, we had a couple of late visitors. So just I'll introduce my daughter and her friends. They're college students at CSU. And I told them they should really come down and see the public process, and so that they made it down. Wow! So I didn't want there to be a mystery, although I was sitting next to her. It was probably obvious. But
He really made you do this?
Well, she's also interested in being a lawyer, and I said she should really watch Cassie and your presentation.
There you go.
So our approach to the bonds is, first, we need to sell the bonds. And we had talked with staff about our goal to focus on 40 mills for the Metro District and then have room there for O&M. We want to keep the O&M as low as possible, but still provide all the services. And when talking to D.A. Davidson, the bond underwriter and marketer for the bonds, they said the conventional bonds out there are 50 and 10, and the bond buying universe that buys these bonds in Colorado, they look to hold bonds in sort of a plain vanilla format. They want their portfolio of bonds to all have similar features, and they understand it, and that component is 50 and 10. So our goal is absolutely to we'll have to disclose to our residents that we've price them based on 40 mils, and that there's an extra 10 mils in there for cushion. We think that also adds cushion to the residents, or relief to the residents, that we're not going up to the max, that there's cushion within that maximum cap. And then, the same thing with O&M. There'll be a point in time when the residents take over the Metro District. We've set this up so ultimately the town would take over the Metro District, at least the O&M portion of it, like you did Superior Metropolitan District. But so you have a cap. That's good for residents taking over, but they also will need leeway. So we're trying to provide, walk that fine line of having that conventional bond and also setting it up so our residents have the experience they're expecting.
So there's a potential that it could go to 50 mils plus the 10 O&M.
Yes, but not above that.
So saying that it won't go above 40, I mean, how can you ensure that? I mean, you can't, right?
You
Yeah.
can't. And it would be a non-conventional type of bond based on something other than 50.
I'll have to chew on that for a little while.
Other questions from the board?
Well, as
Trustee Benson.
property tax assessments just came out May 1st. They're done every other year here, and so I think the last sort of, this is fresh in our minds, and the difference between 40 and 60 is huge in terms of property tax payments. And one, I don't remember seeing in anything I read the 50 plus 10. I saw the 50 with the starting point of 40, so I'm not sure how I missed this in my documents. So
In the public financing agreement, it's 50 plus operations and maintenance, and then...
was the 10% overstated?
No, it was 50 plus operations and maintenance.
Right.
Isn't that correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a difference when the number's attached, for us. And then when I hear that this is competitive with area projects, am I interpreting that correct? Have we ever seen a spreadsheet of area projects and what their mill levies are? What page is that?
It's one of the exhibits.
Yeah, I actually, now that you say it, I recall, but I didn't look at it for that purpose.
Is that the
Say what page number?
I think it's Exhibit F to the service plan.
That can give me the,
I can page number.
yeah.
It's the last page.
Yeah.
206.
206. So, like, in the city of Louisville, the Takata development has 50 total, 5 operating, 45 debt. Broomfield Arista is 75 maximum. Anthem varies, but it's typically 50 or less. Mid-Cities Interlochen Mall is 30 to 40, and then
The last page.
Jefferson or the Gonzales Center is 55.
Hey, Matt, you said that Anthem is a max of 75. Do you know what they actually are at?
They're at
They're at 75?
Yeah.
Wow.
Arista.
Compare that to what the mill levy is in Rock Creek right now.
Well, districts 2 and 3, those districts are at 6.
6 in all.
6.2. But they've gone down every year for the last 5, 10 years.
What was their high?
They have a maximum of 50, of it? Or what is it? Well, maybe.
Sorry, yes, thank you.
Relaying information.
Yes.
We need to bring Paul.
Can you tell the maximum of where they actually reached?
Holden Town staff. The question, I believe, was the existing metropolitan districts, residential metropolitan districts within Superior, which are noted as Superior Metropolitan District number 2 and number 3. As the manager identified, they're currently assessing at 6.2 mils, and that is just for residual debt service. When the town in 2000, and at the end of 2003, beginning of 2004, the town assumed responsibility of those districts after those districts dissolved through a vote of property owners. At that point in time, I think the district's mill levies were anywhere between 22 and 25 mils. Trustee Williams, what their cap was before that, I don't know, but obviously we can get you that information.
But they were assessed at 22. You think that was the highest?
Yes, from memory, I remember seeing as high as 25 mils.
And I'd have to think about my documents, but I think it was unlimited, which was what caused a lot of consternation for early owners within Rock Creek, that they, if the development failed, that they would be on the hook for a whole bunch of money.
Paul?
Sure, yes.
Oh, yeah. Good joke.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay.
I'm Mary Jo Doherty with the law firm of McGeady Cisneros, and I worked on the Superior Metropolitan Districts years ago when I was paralegal, but there was, at the time that those districts were organized, there was no cap on the mill levy, so Andrew's correct, they actually had an unlimited potential for an unlimited mill levy, which the statute that created this limited mill levy didn't come in until after there were some issues with the districts in the late 80s and early 90s. So Superior Metro districts did not have a mill levy cap.
Trustee Pennington?
So obviously where I'm going with this is if we in Rock Creek paying our paltry 6.2 mils, along with all the other mills for fire protection, et cetera, some of us are feeling a little bruised and battered by our property tax assessments. How do you see the competitiveness of these properties in the town center working? How are people going to be able to afford to pay those assessments?
First of all, I think there's a couple of points to that. They'll be very competitive. We're building smaller homes, and our home prices, I think, will generally be lower than the home prices in Rock Creek. Our homes, on average, will probably be half the size. Our average square footage will probably be somewhere around 1,600 square feet. There's a lot of the points on your memo I was glad to see, because we're right in sync with the things that you're hearing from the community.
And price points. Have you anticipated price points?
Price points, unit sizes, direct related, obviously. And then you have the overall experience. We're targeting different people than are being targeted at Arista, for example. Arista is at a much higher tax rate, but overall, we expect to have higher home prices than they do in Arista. We're creating a special product that's not available in the area. We're creating a special place, and whatever the total fees are, whether it's a homeowner's assessment or the price that someone pays for their home or the options and upgrades, all those things will be the choices of the buyer. They'll be fully disclosed. When we look at sort of the competitive market in the global greater Denver area, if somebody wanted to compare Stapleton or projects around, that's why our plan is to target the 40 mills, because we have to disclose the 10 for O&M, and then we're at 150 mills, which is which is right around 1.15% of your home price, and we think that's very competitive overall. There's other places, by the way, that have their statutory taxes are 120 mills, or 119, 120 mills are very common for statutory taxes. So even without having a metro district, and then places that add on metro districts. So the taxes really vary throughout the whole area. We think we're right there, probably in the middle of the pack. That'll be refined as we go to market, because new projects will come. The projects that we're looking at now will, many of those projects are at the end of their life, and they'll be selling out. As it relates to the operations and maintenance, the town code doesn't put any limit on O&M, and we didn't have a limit in our financing agreement that was approved back in March on O&M. In talking with your staff, there was a request to put a cap on O&M, so we put that cap on O&M after talking to our attorneys and consultants as to a cap that was conventional, would be received well. The last thing we want to do is go spend money, and it's one thing to disclose taxes, it's another thing to estimate the taxes based upon the purchase price. So we want to show what we think the tax will be. We'll have an efficient metro district and keep our costs as low as possible.
Trustee Williams.
So the O&M, the 10 mills, would that be in perpetuity past the 25 years?
The cap is in perpetuity. The O&M, candidly, I think a lot of that, well, Mary Jo should probably answer this question, because I'm not as clear here as to how the transition occurs, but we set this up so that the town ultimately would take over the metro district and make those decisions. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I assume, if the debt is all paid off after 25 years, I assume that the districts could actually just be dissolved, and there would be no need to have the districts anymore, as long as there were no maintenance obligations being undertaken. So that's really what would happen. District would dissolve, the town would just take over kind of everything.
So that 10 mills of O&M would dissolve as well? Oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
Trustee Pennington.
Is your name Cassia?
Yes.
When you gave your presentation, you described the metro districts as pods. The familiarity I have with our metro districts is each had a different mill levy assignment, if you will, based on whatever at the time. So can I assume that's how those three different, they'll all have the exact same mill levy? The properties, depending on where I buy in the town center, will they all have the same mill levy?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Because you seem to have one that was called
Yes.
O&M.
Yes, that just means that district will be the one to sign contracts with, people providing services, that sort of thing, file your disclosures, annual disclosures to the state, basically be in charge of operating the district, but they will functionally serve the same way in terms of the mill levy and what you see out in the project.
So every property owner will have the same rate?
Yes.
Okay. And I was a little thrown when I read the details of each plan that you probably just answered the question, each talked about 184 acres. It didn't talk about a proportion of the 184,
Right.
and that's the reason, I assume. Okay.
They'll be included in one, each of the acres will be included in one of the districts, and it just, it'll be determined by how the acreage comes in through the development process of the town.
So obviously, we have a starting point for development.
Yes.
As
Each of the three
Phase 2
districts
comes in, if in fact that necessitates higher mill levy rate, those owners in Phase 1 actually suffer that or have that impact. They don't?
No.
So there will be different total mill
I'm not
levies.
sure that I understand.
Well, this is going to develop in phases.
Well, the people that are in the initial phase, are you saying?
Are you understanding me, Lorenzo?
Obviously,
I'm sorry.
I guess theoretically, you could have slightly different mill levy rates if, as you say, the Phase 2 is later on and the costs are higher and the mill levy needs, but it would still all be subject to the same cap. So
Right.
there wouldn't be any change in that.
But
So
those
potentially you could have slightly
Phase 2 property owners might have a different...
They could potentially have a different mill levy. I don't think the plan is to have a different mill levy, but they could. The other thing that is also potentially a different distinction is commercial property, because commercial property is valued at a much higher rate than residential. So they may actually have a slightly lower rate because they're commercial and they're in the end paying a lot more than the residential property.
Trustee Hansen.
Matt or Kendrick, can you talk about real quickly about the directors of these metro districts, and could this board possibly sit on those boards, or is there a reason why we wouldn't or couldn't do that?
You could if you were a property owner.
If you own property.
So if you move within the district, that's one way. The other way is if you dissolve the districts.
So we all own a portion of property up here in the
Right,
marketplace.
The director's parcel.
Right.
Yeah.
This is not being set up like that.
This is not being set up.
Could it be, though, or would we want to do that, or no?
The answer is no.
Okay.
Can you expound why?
Mary Jo?
I think the developer is putting a substantial amount of money into this project and needs to be able to control when the development happens, when the bonds are issued, and be able to control that. If the boards of the districts are controlled by the town, then he has no control over when those things are going to happen.
Fair enough answer.
Trustee
Can I
Hansen.
clarify one point from my presentation? I discussed the 184 acres, which is the Superior Town Center property that's included within the 2006 addition to the urban renewal area, and it's considered the project, but the developer currently only owns 157 of those acres. And so in order for that property that is owned by other parties to come into the district, they would have to be either under the same ownership as the developer, or those folks themselves would have to vote to be included. So I just want to make that clear, that those properties, even though they're within the service plan area, could be included within the district boundaries without that.
Let's see, a couple of questions. So presumably each district is going to be responsible for a certain percentage of the infrastructure. Are specific physical assets going to be assigned to each specific district? Or is it taking the property in its entirety?
As the improvements are constructed, whichever district is responsible for financing them, the improvement, but all the improvements are planned to be owned by District Number 1. So District Number 2 might pay for financing a certain portion of the improvements. Then District 1 would own them and it'd probably transfer them to the town, because in the end, the town is going to end up owning most of the improvements.
Okay.
But we'll have to allocate them based on the financing, so the public infrastructure can be financed with bond proceeds.
Okay, and each one would have roughly the same amount of debt associated, presumably?
Presumably, yeah. It's kind of hard to tell, yeah.
And do each of the capital, there's a list of the capital expenditures, and are those the only capital expenditures that could occur that would be financed by this district?
I think it could be any public improvement that would be required by, is it a final development plan?
Yes.
So it'd be, I mean, that's kind of not a very specific list that we have at this point, but when a final development plan is approved, then a district could finance any of those improvements that are in a final development plan.
And would the town approve what would be eligible infrastructure costs as a part of the FDP, or how would that work?
They would be called public improvements on the FDP, and then it would be up to district council to determine which of those improvements are legally eligible to be subject to district financing.
The districts would
Yes.
find which, but we would identify what's a public improvement.
And what's required to be constructed, and then how that happens is really up to the developer and their council.
I think I just have two last ones, but what prevents the people voting for the gold-plated mailbox if the O&M is not governed by somebody? I mean, presumably the developer will be responsible, but 10 mils of O&M potentially could be used for anything, as far as I can tell. It doesn't seem to be a restriction.
It's for district, whatever services and improvements the district's providing. So the town owns all of the improvements. The district has a very limited purpose of paying for basically the administrative costs of the district, making sure the bonds get paid, doing the audit, doing the budget, those kinds of things. I guess theoretically, if the residents wanted to build another improvement, maybe that wasn't built at the time, and they had step authorization in their service plan, they could maybe build a swimming pool or something and maybe operate it. But at that point, it's kind of it's up to the residents to do what they would like to do.
Which is an area that that's an area that we got into with Superior Metropolitan Districts number 2 and 3, that they started operating as independent governments essentially and improving different things, and that caused a lot of heartburn and heartache. Is there a way to prevent that from occurring?
Well, I think you would have to approve the construction of a swimming pool, so it would be...
We have certain land use controls. We also, anytime that it's something that's outside the service plan as you're approving tonight, you have to come back and get an amendment to the service plan approved.
And that would include any of these, whatever I guess would be on the FDP in terms of what is a public improvement.
The town's approving all the FDPs, so you have total approval rights over those.
Okay. Gosh, I thought this was so fascinating. You wouldn't know what to say.
There's a limit.
And tell me, describe to me in general, what's the interplay between the Urban Renewal Authority in the area, payments for debt, and the Metropolitan District's payment of debt? Who's going to be responsible for what and what amounts?
We don't totally know that. We know that $145 million worth of debt can be issued by the district, and that's going to be paid for with the pledge of the property tax revenues of the district, as well as the Urban Renewal Authority property tax increment revenues and the sales tax increment revenues. So, and then the authority has agreed to give up to 75%, I think, of 145?
Right.
145, that it would be allowed to be used for public infrastructure.
And so this would cover the delta between the 75% and the total amount of 145? Is that what this is presumably going to be used for?
Well, it's 75 not to exceed the 100 million.
Okay.
Or the 105 million.
But whatever that maximum amount, the reason why these districts are really being created is to cover that difference between
Exactly.
TIF and this metropolitan district. Okay.
And I think there's actually like $198 million worth of public improvements, so the district won't even, there's
Get close
obviously
to
going to
that.
be improvements that the developer's just going to be paying for.
And then just as an aside, people have had discussions, and maybe staff has had these discussions about perhaps our neighbor providing some sanitary sewer service. I noticed that's in part in here. There wouldn't be any reason why that would potentially be limited if...
No. That wouldn't be limited, but...
Okay. That's all I had. Anything else from the board?
I do.
Trustee
but-
Pennington?
I have one minor...
Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Sorelli.
Question.
Yes.
Just noticed in the service plan, and I got this from the write-up actually, but that there's a slight deviation from there's many deviations, or one deviation from our code dealing with maximum voted interest rate and maximum underwriting discount, and there's language in there that says that prior to the issuance of any debt, the district shall furnish to the town an opinion of the district's bond council, that the district has complied with all requirements of this service plan relating to debt, and the district shall submit all financing documents to the town attorney for the limited purpose of determining that the debt has complied with all other requirements of the service plan. And the limited purpose part is sort of like a deviation from our code, and I was wondering, what does our town attorney think about that? Because I don't like someone telling me that we're limited.
Express this to them, I don't like that.
I don't see any good reason why we should be limited in what our town attorney is going to advise us on.
I guess we would just feel more comfortable if there was somebody else, like the finance director was also
We might get his opinion too.
I mean, I think there's certain aspects to the bond documents that there are aspects related to the service plan, but it's primarily, making sure that we're within the interest rates, the maximum underwriter discount, those kinds of things. But there's not a lot in the service plan in excess that the town attorney, I would think, would really be commenting on with respect to the bond documents. So, to the extent that you want the finance director to review the financing provisions, that might also...
I'd kind of like to have the option of having the review done the way I want the review done.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we don't just maybe we could expand it somehow so it's not the town attorney reviewing all those provisions.
How about just the town?
I don't know why we're changing that at all.
I wouldn't change it. The town attorney, if it's something that I don't understand, I'm going to go to the finance director, so.
I'm comfortable with that. I see no reason why you all should be directing how we use our town attorney. And that is our side of the agreement.
Can you give me the page number? I'm sorry.
Well, this would be in...
Your page number?
My page number it's, I guess, repeated in every agreement, but this would be in... The one particular one I'm looking at is on page 180. And it's probably not a big deal, but it's kind of like...
It is one of the things I was going to bring up anyway, so I appreciate it.
So which line? I'm sorry, I'm looking.
Well, if you go down, be halfway, this is the write-up. We have a different write-up that's a proposed modification of the town code. The town code would require submission for the approval of the town attorney, essentially. And this is limiting the town attorney's review to just the legal aspects.
I read that all over too and wondered why.
That seems like it's within our discretion.
Joe, just you're sort of touching on a broader issue here. We were given a May 8th memo by McGeady Cisneros that actually asked for a number of deviations from town code, and it's a separate memo that Kendra said, and it's not confidential, so I can refer to it here,
Yes,
right?
correct.
And I would actually, there are a number of them, of these modifications, and I'd like to actually just call that up and go through them and get Kendra's opinion on which of those she supports and doesn't. For example, the first one is that we treat the audited financial statements of the developer and his wherewithal and all that kind of stuff confidentially, and we have definitely gotten, all of us, I'm sure, the same emails from residents who want to see those. And frankly, my gut is that the members of this community should be able to see and have confidence in the developer of this project. So I'd like to, Randy, you're here, and Kendra, you're here. I'd like to hear how you've dealt with that, Kendra, and other communities. And
Sure.
It is an active request we have from some residents. But I'd like to actually go back to that May 8th memo that you recently sent out and just go through the requested modifications and get your opinion on them.
Of course. Excuse me, on that one, it is up to the board as to how to deal with that. I will tell you that most of my clients do not have this particular requirement in their codes for an audited financial statement to be publicly submitted. I will also tell you that under the Open Records Act, there is the ability to keep that confidential, but it's a board decision as to,
Right.
a policy perspective, whether you would like to or not.
Well, from a board member's position, I asked early on that we have done all of our financial and legal due diligence. I've been assured that we have done that, both financially and legally, but I've not seen a single document as a board member, and that makes me uncomfortable, because I can't even answer questions to the public in general.
course.
And I can't honestly answer that. I've seen those documents. I've just been given the verbal assurances. So, certainly, I believe we as board members should see these documents and have some confidence so that we can at least convey that confidence.
Exactly. You're certainly entitled to see them,
Right.
and
And
the
we have-
question, I think, before
Right,
you was...
and we have not, and I
Right.
would like to put out an official request that the results of all due diligence be forwarded to the board.
And it's really it's your call whether to keep those confidential. So
Right.
I agree with you. You should certainly see those documents.
Right. How does anybody else feel?
Well, I think we can keep them confidential, but it gives us at least the information that we can convey to the public in a more general way without going
Right.
to real numbers. Otherwise, we're kind of in the dark. We can't really answer them, so.
I completely agree.
Okay. So, Kendra, would you take us through that memo?
Yes, I'm
And
trying
give
to
us
pull
your
up the
opinion?
memo now. Here it is. Okay.
Does everybody know where
It
to
wasn't in
find
my
it?
packet.
No,
I haven't printed your,
It was an email
It
that
was
Kendra
the
sent
letter,
out
yeah.
on an update.
what's the,
It's memorandum to board, right? To town board, is that what you're talking about?
wow.
It was sent on Thursday
And it's,
by Phyllis.
it's dated May 8th.
it says,
Okay, sorry.
it's 3 memos, and this one is
Okay, yep, sorry.
service plans for,
Yep.
okay.
Which one of these?
So on the first one, I would just let you know that once you make a decision as to, it sounds like your decision would be that you would like to see those. You can make that a condition of this approval, that you receive those, because obviously
Absolutely.
they were not submitted, so.
Right. Well, and I'm actually broadening what I want to see to staff and to attorneys, that I would like the board to have access to all due diligence, which would include these financials, developer financial statements.
Okay. All right, so if we're going through the memo, that was the first item, was service plan contents, subsection 2. Subsections 5 and 10 require a description of the facility services and public improvements. The issue here is that these service plans are a bit early for the level of detail we have for the project.
Yeah, that kind of made sense to me.
And that one, I would say exactly the same thing, Trustee Sorelli, that at this point, we have, I think, all the detail we can have, and because you have an FDP coming forward in the very near future, you will have more detail at that point, and you actually will be controlling some of that detail.
Right, so that was obviously my question earlier.
Right. Subsection 6, this is basically the same. My position's the same on this one. You will look at this when you look at the FDP, and you will determine, how this works as well. So I'm fine with that one. The next is subsection 11, which is, we're now on. Subsection 11 requires an independent absorption and feasibility study supporting the district's ability to discharge debt. This is, what they're proposing is that you have a financing plan prior to issuing any bonds. And again, this goes back to the fact that we don't have a land use plan yet. So they can't have an absorption and feasibility study because we don't know what the public improvements will be.
So does this presume that once we do have such, we will get this absorption and feasibility study?
Yes, we will get it prior to any bonds being issued.
I assume bond counsel, nobody's going to buy bonds unless
Right.
the feasibility has been done, because I'll say it's too high risk.
Exactly. This subsection 12A requires the draft IGA, and if you look in the exhibit to the service plan, there's a draft IGA. This requires the draft IGA to require approval of the town board for any future changes in the boundaries of the district. This is one where the developer and myself, we've disagreed on this. I think this should remain as is. And I was going to bring this up. Basically, as the 3 districts are being formed right now, they're very small areas, but then they have a larger service area, What developer is asking for is that as long as they're adding property to the districts, but it's within that defined service area, being this 184 acres, that they do not need your approval. I disagree. I think you should be able to approve each inclusion prior to the inclusion. That's the way it's written in your code. The response I did get, and I will of course let them speak, but the response I got from the developer was that it would be more bureaucracy, basically, more of a process. My thought is they're already coming in to get an FDP approved for each phase. So I don't see it adding a lot of process to also get the town board at the same time the FDP is approved to approve the inclusion of property. And I think all it does is protect us, because we want to make sure the inclusion of property happens at the time it's supposed to, which is when the FDP is approved. But I will certainly let Developers Council present their, argument about this, or their position. And we can do that now, or I can go through the rest of the memo.
Keep going.
Rest of the memo?
Sure.
The next is Section 3-1-50 financial requirements. Subsection 1 limits the debt service mill levy to 25. Basically, we've already dealt with that in the public financing agreement, and we've already discussed this earlier tonight, so I think that modification is appropriate. Same thing in subsections 2 and 5. We've approved these modifications already in the public financing agreement. Subsection 3, very bottom of that page, requires text of the initial ballot questions. I will tell you that Developers Council did submit text of the ballot questions, and it added approximately 50 pages to the service plan, and I asked that they be taken out because it was, all it really did was provide a bunch of confusion as to what the ballot questions would look like. Again, I think it's a little premature. They'll be working on the ballot questions prior to the November election, and I just...
And who approves the final copy?
They do, because it's only their voters that will be voting on it.
Oh, I see.
So that was really, staff recommended that we not include them because they were really added to the complexity, I think, needlessly of these documents.
Okay.
Subsection 6 prohibits the acceleration of the principal of any bonds or other financial obligations of the district except credit-enhanced bonds or other obligations. And Paul just left, but I was at a very inconvenient time. But we talked about this. I agree with the Developers Council here that it's rather ambiguous, and we're not quite sure what it's designed to prevent, and therefore we think the modification is appropriate. Basically what they're saying is as long as they're in accordance with the financing plan that you all will approve, then they should be able to do whatever they want with their debt after you've already approved it. So, subsections 8, 9, and 10 require a bond marketing schedule and plan, a bond proceeds schedule, and a detailed cash flow analysis for each year. This goes back to, we don't have a land use plan yet, we don't know what public improvements will be required yet, and therefore this was premature. And we've already basically gone through this in the public financing agreement, and they will give us those projections, but we're not ready to do that yet. Subsection 11 requires the district to submit all financing documents regarding debt to the town attorney for approval. This is where we started with Trustee Sorelli's question. I agree with Trustee Sorelli. I don't think that this is necessary to modify. We've, again, gone back and forth with Developers Council about this. Subsection 12 requires the district to file certain documents with the town promptly. I completely agree with this modification because it's much better to have a number of days than an ambiguous word like promptly. So I think that's a good modification. And then the last item is the maximum operating mill levy, which I believe you all have already discussed. Oh, wait, hold on, there's one more after that, I'm sorry. The town board approval of district-imposed fees. What we've asked is that they submit fees to us for approval prior to imposing them. Because, as you may know, fees aren't subject to TABOR, so there's really not a lot of limitation on the amount of fees that can be charged. We asked for this, and their response was, well, we really don't want to do it, but we'll do it as long as approval cannot be unreasonably withheld, which I think is an appropriate standard.
So can we discuss the two items that there's a difference of opinion?
Of course. Would you like to hear?
I would like to hear, yes.
Okay, as it relates to subsection 2, requires the attachment of a developer resume and audit as an exhibit to the service plans. Candidly, I don't think the audit's anybody's business, what our financial affairs are. We're providing a financing plan, so as it relates to the bonds, which is the public interest should be in the bonds, there'll be a financing plan showing what the proceeds are and how the proceeds are used, and there'll be a final development plan approved by this board, identifying all the public infrastructure that needs to be constructed. So you'll have all of that information. In our business, we have a lot of people that just are less than constructive and try to get into our business. I've had people calling, six people that I've done business with in Southern California, calling our office and demanding to talk to different people in our office. They've contacted the sellers and the sellers' agents and attorneys. And
I'm sorry, who has done this?
Residents within this town.
Okay.
They have gone to great lengths. I believe they've slandered us. They will, which we'll be following up on. So there's just there's sort of a dirty side to this business, and I think any information that we release is not, if it's private information, it's sort of anything you give out is not helpful. It's just another daisy chain in the world for harassment. I think what really is important is what are the proceeds from public bonds, and how are those proceeds spent? What are they going to be spent on?
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand why we would care. We care what the financial performance of the bonds are, right?
That's up to you, yes.
Well, I'm trying to understand what would be the benefit of doing something beyond just that. I mean, I want to do what's in the best interest of the town, and if there's a best interest of the town that I'm somehow missing here, but it seems like what we care about is what the financial performance of the repayment of the bonds are.
In some cases, we've seen developers themselves go bankrupt, and that does impact the bonds, and that also impacts, it impacts a lot of things. So.
But presumably the bondholders are on the hook for that, right?
Sometimes, yes. It depends at what point public improvements are being done. It really depends. I've seen other issues occur where the public improvements are kind of half finished. Bondholders are on the hook, but then the town's stuck cleaning it up. So,
if I could just provide a counter to that, we're going to provide financial assurances for all public improvements before we start the first component of any phase. So, that's the money that you'll be looking at is, you'll approve financial assurances at that time for the phase of infrastructure.
That would be sort of my perspective, but so I don't want to argue against the town attorney has given me legal advice. It's always best to take the town attorney's legal advice, but
I'm just thinking of a particular situation where, yes, the problem in that case was we took the security that was provided for the improvements, the town took it, and then the bankruptcy court took it. And then we had to argue about whether to get it back. So, there's just a potential there for, again, if you want to make sure that the developer has the financial wherewithal to basically complete the project, that would be the only reason to review these financial statements. So,
I would suggest a lot of companies that go bankrupt file annual audited financial statements. An audit is a rear view.
And banks do that too, and we've had that experience in town where banks go belly up. So
exactly.
I think we as board members are obligated to perform financial due diligence. And I am happy letting our finance director determine what the breadth and scope of that should be, as long as he and the town manager and the attorney assure that we are making a solid decision, and that I can go back to my residents and tell them things have been thoroughly vetted. So I don't want to go into the details of what that comprises. I would instead like to rely on the professionals to give me those assurances.
So that sounds like a slight modification to this then.
Well,
Well, I think what they're actually proposing in here is, if required by the town, audited financial statements of the developer will be provided subject to a confidentiality agreement with the town.
I don't have a problem with agreeing to it.
And if we agreed, and confidentiality is fine with me, as long as we as a board are given the appropriate documents, which we must then hold confidential, that we can at least assure the residents that we have seen the due diligence that's been done.
And that's what they're proposing as their modification, and if the board is fine with that.
That's, more than enough for me, honestly.
That's fine with me, too.
Yeah.
So you're fine with that? The developer has said yes to that modification?
Yes, we agreed to.
Yes.
That's our proposal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're agreeing to that.
Yeah, either way, I would almost just get rid of
But
it.
if I can reiterate, I know it's been heard, but if I can reiterate again, I believe we as board members need to see this. Okay? I want to see it so that I can truthfully say to residents, I've seen it.
All right.
It does say, yeah, they will be provided with subject to a confidentiality agreement, so that's fine.
Okay.
If that's the terms of the agreement, that still has to be negotiated.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Okay. Next.
There's one more item. I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is
Two more.
Yeah.
I lost the other one then.
Subsection 12.
12A was the...
12A.
Yeah, 12A.
And
The
it was-
inclusion of property issue. I think that this is just another issue where the developer would like certainty that they will be able to include the property at the time they need to include it and not have to go to the town to get additional consent. And as long as the property is within the service area and is going to be used, we're not going out the boundaries of that service area. I'm not quite sure why the town needs to be involved in the consent to that process. All it does is just add additional cost to the district to get the inclusion processed. The other thing, as Cassie had mentioned earlier, we can't include any property unless the property owner, the person that owns the property, actually submits a petition to be included in the district. So the district can't go around including property without the property owner's consent.
I think the question, though, is can you do it when we don't agree? If the board is fundamentally opposed to what it is you want to do, where are the checks and balances? Isn't that what you were saying?
But as long as it's in the service area, I'm not sure why would you disagree? I mean, I don't know.
And I would say that's exactly our point.
Right.
It's exactly our concern.
Yeah.
We want to be able to implement the project. We want to be able to count on the fact that we're going to have a service area that includes the land that we own. That's exactly why we're asking for this. We don't want, to have, we'll of course only go forward if we have a positive vote on the plan here in the schedule that's been laid out. But, councils change and people change. We don't want to have, be $50 million into a project and have people show up and do things that just try to prevent us from implementing the project. We want the assurances that we're going to be able to go forward and finish the project with the way that with the plan that we set forth before we put in any money.
Okay.
Trustee Williams.
I guess I'm having trouble with this in the fact that aren't you submitting a final development plan of the entire property from the very beginning? Or are you doing it in
We're
phases?
submitting a preliminary development plan.
What's being submitted for the 10th is a plan, it's an amendment to the plan development,
Correct.
okay?
For the entire
Right.
development.
And then final development plans proceed from that point
At each
in
phase?
each phase.
Okay, now I understand.
Which we get to vote on.
Yes.
Right.
And approve.
And my issue is that I believe that the inclusion of property should come along with the FDP as you approve it, and that you should be able to decide, this is the FDP that you're looking at for this phase, and along with that, that will be the inclusion of the property that's appropriate to be included, rather than have it be piecemeal done without your knowledge, without your consent. And I don't see the burden, because they already have to come to you for an FDP approval, so it's not as if...
It'll be part in the same
Exactly.
process, right? I mean, they'll come back with the FDP and here's the...
Right. they can't move forward without an FDP anyway, so to me, it seems to make more sense to include the inclusion, the FDP, all for the phase, and have it all come to you in one package rather than piecemeal.
And it sounds like your risk is not really, your risk is that the FDP wouldn't get approved, right?
Right.
Not that the service plan and area would be incorporated, right?
I mean, I think the other thing is potentially if we're doing a financing and we're not sure which district it's going to be included in at the time the FDP is approved, I don't know if we'll necessarily, we'll probably know it, but I don't know if we necessarily will, so I don't think we necessarily want to actually follow that FDP approval process. Because we could be putting like all the commercial property in one district and all the residential property in another district for financing purposes. But at that point, we don't really know for sure, so.
There's a couple issues. I would characterize it as the risk issue. I characterized it earlier. We're going to have the PD, and then the final development plans have to conform with the PD and the design guidelines. And so we can assess that risk. We can say, okay, can we read the design guidelines? Can we read the PD? Can we read the town code? If we can read them and our professionals can read them, we can submit an FDP that's going to be approved. And the town, I think we have certain rights to approve things that comply with those documents. If there's another town board, I mean, we're clearly, candidly not talking about you because you haven't approved anything of our project yet. Right. If you approve the amendment, we're not talking about you either because you'll have approved the project. So what we're talking about is controlling the risk down the road for long-term projects that somebody else has decided they want to, run for office to change things. And we all know that happens in politics from time to time. We don't want them to run with the expectation that they're going to change our project next street. It's fine if we don't start it, if we walk away. That we don't want to, but that's the way the ball bounces. Yeah. But once we start going, we want to be able to go forward. We don't want to be inappropriately stymied. If we're following the plan, if we're following the town code, following the design guidelines, we want to be able to move forward.
I understand where you're coming from, the way you explained this now.
Trustee Williams?
So, yeah, I get it too, and so based on that, why wouldn't you design the entire parcels, all of them, and put that forward in the beginning so you don't have that risk later on down the road when you're doing phase 2 FDP, right?
That's a great question, and you have the best example imaginable to answer that question. And the example is Rock Creek Ranch. There's a project that it was significantly designed at one point in time, and from what I'm hearing from people in the community and some meetings that I've attended with you, all that product is the same, and it didn't evolve with the market and with people's and consumer tastes and things like that.
It did a little bit, but not much.
People complain about it as not. That's just what I've heard.
Yeah.
So we want each phase of our project to be, as contemporary and reactive to where the market is. Number one.
So what you're saying is that you're not going to complete construction of the entire project within the next 4 years?
Right.
Okay.
Right. We need to design
hoping for that, but
well, that's beyond hope. That would be very aggressive. Yeah.
I need an example. I see the merits to both sides here. I need a tangible example.
So here's Rock Creek Ranch. I don't want to be speaking for you, so cut me off if I'm wrong, but Rock Creek Ranch was approved, and on the south of Colton, it had smaller lot sizes and didn't have a pool, and an amendment to that, after people thought about it for a while, they increased the lot sizes and they added a pool. Mm-hmm. I would assume it'd be sort of analogous to that they'll come forward and you could have an approval and an amendment. That would be one option, I suppose.
But what I'm wondering, where is the disconnect here? What do you want to be able to do without bringing it before us?
We want to be able to know that all of the property that we own is going to be eventually within one of the metropolitan districts. Mm-hmm. And that we can then count on the funding from those metropolitan districts to pay for the infrastructure that is going to be in the final development plans that we will submit to you as the project evolves.
They don't want to be midstream and have something happen from a different board, right?
That would be a very different board, but it's
That would be a very
possible.
different board, but, they're saying, I just wondering, if I'm going to get into this and invest all this money and all this time, all these years, I don't want to be midstream and be blindsided by a very different board.
But neither does the board want to be blindsided by a change made by the developer that we don't agree
Either way,
with.
So let's talk about what change we could make. I mean, it's a healthy dialogue.
That's why-
What change can we make?
Yeah.
You have the PD, and you have design guidelines, and you have your town code,
And we have defined service area, right?
and a defined service area. Exactly.
So I don't see them blindsiding us for some reason, but it could be naive. You're smiling. You're looking.
Again, I made my recommendation. I wouldn't modify this. I don't see the need for it. I don't see it adding a huge burden. But obviously,
It's not a burden, it's a risk.
Yeah.
I think it just misconstrued, think of it as us saying we don't, we're uncomfortable with another 20 pieces of paper. It's not.
Okay,
It's not
that was
a
one of the
burden.
arguments that was given today.
So, maybe to help Trustee Bennington, can you give an example where you would bring one of the properties you own into a district that's not already included in the FDP? Is that what you're talking about there?
So, great example. I might, hopefully I'm not repetitive, or hopefully I'm understanding the question. So we get our PD approved, we close on the property, in 6 months, we bring forward FDP, we annex in the first phase, you're all sitting here, you've approved the FDP, and we bring in the land in the phase 1 without asking you into the metro district. It's the same as the phase that the FDP you just approved. You're not harmed, we're not harmed, you've approved the FDP. 3 years later, we're ready for the next phase, and there's a different board sitting here. And we've got a whole bunch of money sitting in the ground. We have a project that's partially completed because it's just the first phase, and we come forward with an FDP. And the town says, we're not going to approve this FDP. And we say, well, why? It complies with the PD, complies with the design guidelines, complies with the town code. And maybe we have a fight over that. Maybe we sue to enforce our right to get our FDP approved. Town board says, okay, fine, we'll approve the FDP because the court ordered us to, but we're not going to annex your land into the metro district. So, tough. And it is tough. That wouldn't work. I mean, that's a purely discretionary action where that's just too much risk. It's too much risk. We would never go forward.
Couldn't we say as part of the FDP, it's the FDP and the service plan, you can't bifurcate them?
I think he's saying he wants to.
No, I'm sorry. They're separate documents.
I know they're separate documents, but you would presumably do both at the same time.
We would do both. We just think that we have a right, as long as we follow the PD.
I agree.
And the design guidelines and the town code, we think we have a right to process a final development plan, and eventually we'll prevail. And when you have a lot of money on the lines, if you resort to an arbitration or some third party, there's things that we can resort to and get resolved. Reasonable people can also disagree. As it relates to pure discretion on annexing our land into a metropolitan district, that's a pure discretionary action you could take or not take, and we wouldn't have a basis to make you do it. And here we're stuck with a project with somebody who didn't like, the color of a roof tile, and they stopped our project.
Can we have an example of what the concern is? What do you think could happen?
Well, we'll use, I think part of the problem is, let's say they get an FDP approved for the first phase. That works fine, and then they add area to, say, district number 2 that's outside of the first FDP. It's already being assessed. It will create different assessments, I would imagine, based on the construction that's occurring, because there will be construction in the first phase, no construction in the second phase. There may be some ability for them to impose these mill levies without actually constructing anything. which I understand the property value would be minimal, but I think the purpose of this entire plan is to impose these mill levies as part of the development, not
Wouldn't they
separately.
be, if it wasn't in anything, that wouldn't they be imposing the mill levy on themselves because they're the property owner?
Unless they sold it. I mean, they have every right to sell.
We'll agree to a condition not to annex land in that's not subject to an FDP that's been approved by somebody.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's all we ever ask for.
Okay, all right.
Done.
Great, I mean, I think I can't believe that we spent all that, I think we're all on the same
can't either,
page.
but-
So I understand your concern and risk and all that kind of stuff, but I think we're somehow all on the same page.
And I think that works. I mean, that was the whole purpose, is to keep it within an FDP.
Okay, so do you have
So
language that would say that?
Basically, they can't take land from somewhere else, buy it, and put that PD over there.
Right. Put that mill levy over there, exactly.
So do you want to?
There was another one, I think.
Would the applicant want to read language then, or do you want to read language? Do you guys have a preference?
I think it would be good that we're all on the same page, just to make sure.
Sure. Do you want to try to come up with language? Or do you want me
I think it's just what Randy said.
Yeah, they
There
won't.
must be some sort of legalese though, right? That's why they're getting big money. It's nebulous.
I don't think I'm convenient to say what he said.
Do you want to put that in your conditions of approval?
Yeah, do you want me to draft that? Okay, I'll work on that.
And there was one other item?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that the one I brought up.
The town attorney one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about that now. No, I'm just kidding.
See how quickly we can.
And that wasn't even in this list.
No.
It is.
It is?
Yeah, I guess, it's a finance plan, so it's sources and uses of funds. You can use your staff how you want to use your staff.
That would be good for us.
Great.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the only
Oh, that's
condition,
subsection 11?
Yeah, so that's not a change from the code then.
Okay.
And with Paul back in the room, I would like to do this subsection 6, prohibits the acceleration of the principal. I didn't understand a word when I read that.
Which one was this?
The one that everybody.
Subsection
was
6.
ambiguous,
yes.
Except probably Paul.
Paul, you stepped out right when we were talking about that.
Paul wrote that very conveniently, just at the right moment.
So, again, Paul Nelstown, staff. And again, if someone could briefly summarize the item for me as I'm reading through it here.
You're reading
Subsection
subsection 6.
Correct?
The page numbering doesn't make sense because everything's page 2. But, so it's still my
I know, everything on the header says page 2 and everything.
But it would be the 5th page if you had numbered your pages as I had.
Our town code apparently prohibits the acceleration of the principal of any bonds or other financial obligations of the district except credit-enhanced bonds or other obligations. So that's our current town code, as I understand, and they're proposing that modification. And Kendra said, you're the man on this one.
I think what I said, Paul, is I think we all agreed it was rather ambiguous, and that if it's detailed in the financing plan, and we have a chance to review that financing plan, that we will have the ability to make sure we're covered at that time.
I agree with all those, especially the ambiguity statement there. But I think as the applicant is proposing, in accordance with the finance plan, and as staff and board have the ability to review and approve a finance plan, I have no problem with that language.
So we're in violent agreement.
Okay.
I had no other questions. That's where we were last night, before we started this. So,
Public comment regarding any of this? Okay. So language that we,
Okay, I'm working on it.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
can we come over and watch you?
Sure.
No
Stand
pressure.
right here.
but the subsection 6 says that you could prepay. Now, I saw the proposed modification, but if it's in accordance with the finance plan, then he could refund the bonds, principal payments at a lower interest rate if I mean, I can't imagine it's going to go lower interest rate, but
I think we're primarily, this is Mary Jo Doherty again, talking about acceleration in the event of a default on the bonds. And basically, nobody really wants acceleration to happen, least of all us. But sometimes when you're doing a letter of credit with a bank, they'll have certain requirements. Because if the letter of credit gets called, the bonds get accelerated and then the bank owns them. So it's more just if you're doing a financing, it may apply in some circumstances, but not others. Popular transactions right now also include loan transactions, which is a very new thing that districts are doing. But the loans only go for a certain period of time. So like maybe 10 years, and then at 10 years you would potentially have a balloon payment. But you don't want, obviously, you don't want we don't want acceleration in that circumstance either. So basically what we do is we'll raise our mill levy to a certain amount to pay that, but we won't allow for acceleration.
all right, and this is all
It's pretty,
spelled
it's
out.
uncommon, but it comes up in different circumstances, so we just wanted to be clear that it'd have to be approved in the financing plan.
Okay.
I'm typing, sorry.
Is there only one resolution for all three?
That's what I only found one.
There's one resolution for all three.
Yes, there's one for all three. There are different sections within that resolution.
Okay. Is that the one on page 100 then?
Yes.
Okay.
So while we're waiting here, the capital plans that are in each of these, I assume are just pretty much preliminary estimates and conjecture at this point, and don't bind us in any way, shape, or form.
Correct. I mean, we're limited by the 145 million. That's what we're
Right.
limited by.
And it's all going to be spelled out in more detail in the FDP.
Okay. This is the only condition we have, correct?
Well, we had agreed to change that one other one to the language of the code.
To be able to use our staff.
Uh-huh.
The tab is right here, approval of the finance plan.
Right.
Right, okay. I'm gonna need a second, because
Yeah.
I have to retype this, sorry.
Do you want to, there's anything else coming forward? Do you want to take a
Maybe we take a
5-minute
5-minute break, and then I'll
come
have
back?
it done.
I mean, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any,
The applicant,
Okay, a motion.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
on the record, that you guys are all happy with that. Happy?
No, there's something.
Are they happy with that?
we need a yes from you guys, yes or no?
Do you want to come look at it? Yes, that would be great.
Yeah, no,
I put it in italics.
That's good.
Going back to marching.
The developer capital indicated that changes, that is fine. The way it's written.
So for the record will show that the developer applicant has approved the language as read by the town attorney.
And I will forward, just for your information, I will forward this document to Developers Council. Then it will be actually, the service plan will be changed so that it reflects these actual conditions rather than having this be separate. So they will
Okay.
actually go back and fix it within the document.
So nothing else for the board?
No.
Trustee Cirelli?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that,
Excuse me, did you close the public hearing?
Oh, yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Phil's
yeah.
on top of it.
All right. So close the public hearing. Thank you. A little sidetrack there.
okay, I'd like to make a motion that that we approve Town of Superior Resolution Number R-26,
26.
Series 2013, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving the service plans for Superior Town Center Metropolitan Districts number 1, 2, and 3, subject to the changes to these 3 service plans just read by the town attorney.
Motion by trustee Cirelli, second by trustee Gregorus. Any further discussion regarding this? Phyllis?
Are we spending money?
145 million.
I think you might want to do a roll call.
Cirelli,
Yes.
Gregoris,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Buckle,
Yes.
Pennington,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. Anything else to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.